1991, year 2 in the 90s. 91 would be a time when Saddam Hussein would feel the wrath of coalition aircraft. A king would be beaten in front of a shocked country, and a shadow would be cast over the world.
Watch yourself, she's a wild one.
We're going to talk about the news, culture, sports, and entertainment, and all that was weird in the 90s. This is Timeline. This one's going to be fun because it's all about 1991. But before we get started, be sure to subscribe to the Weird History channel and let us know in the comments below what story from the 1990s you would like a full video on. Now, are you ready for 91?
I need your clothes, your boots, and your motorcycle.
You forgot to say please. This is 1991. The year started with a leadoff hit when on January 7th, Major League Baseball's all-time hits leader, Pete Rose, was released from a minimum security prison. Charlie Hustle, who had been serving 5 months for federal income tax evasion, took it to the halfway house called Talbot House, where residents typically shared their room with 2 or 3 other people. A little over a week later, on January 16th, the winds of war kicked up when President George H.W. Bush announced the commencement of Operation Desert Storm. The attack began within hours, with waves of coalition warplanes attacking targets in and around Iraq. Besides military targets, American forces also bombed strategic locations like Iraq oil refineries, the international airport, and even the presidential palace of President Saddam Hussein. I wonder if homeowners insurance covers that. Just 2 days later, on January 18th, 13,000 fans showed up at the Salt Palace in Salt Lake City, Utah to watch AC/DC perform. The band was playing the recent hit Thunderstruck when the crowd surged toward the stage. Security guards lost control, and at least a half a dozen people were injured in the ensuing panic. 3 of those people who were taken from the concert later died. The disaster was later blamed on festival seating practices. NBC's TGIF was a block of interconnected sitcoms that included shows like Full House, Family Matters, and Perfect Strangers. While Family Matters was a spin-off of Perfect Strangers, the TGIF universe really began on January 25th when Family Matters' Steve Urkel showed up on Full House to help Stephanie cope with her new glasses.
And always remember, hold your head up high. Otherwise, those suckers will slide right off your nose.
After that, Urkel popped up in at least 4 other ABC sitcoms, and the TGIF universe was off and running. In late January, Coach Bill Parcells and his New York Giants faced off against Coach Marv Levy and the Buffalo Bills in Super Bowl 25. With heightened fears because of the ongoing Gulf War, the game, which was attended by almost 74,000 people, was played under high security at Tampa Stadium in Florida. The game is most famous because of a missed field goal slicing right of the goalpost by Bills kicker Scott Norwood. The Giants won it 20-19. On February 7th, the hit series LA Law aired its famous Lesbian Kiss episode, He's a Crowd. The same-sex smooch, which was the first of its kind on network television, was considered controversial at the time, and a handful of advertisers pulled their commercials.
It was a big deal, a big deal. It was hard for one of the actresses. It was hard all the way around.
But that was nothing new for the show, which was famous for breaking taboos.
I like men.
So do I.
You're,
Flexible?
2 days later, SNL went live from New York with a brand new cast member, Adam Sandler. Sandler had joined the series as a writer in 1990 and made his first on-camera appearance on December 8th of that year.
Nothing, I'm trying to sell Dial-Master.
But the February 9th, 1991 episode was his first as an official member of the cast.
A census taker once tried to test me. I ate his liver with some fava beans and a nice Chianti.
We go to San Francisco, where on Valentine's Day, the Bay City's landmark Domestic Partnerships Law went into effect. While domestic partnerships were mostly symbolic and lacked most of the legal trappings of legal marriage, it was still widely considered a victory for gay rights. 500 people took advantage of the law on the first day, registering 250 domestic partnerships. The celebration was capped off by a procession down the stairway beneath the City Hall dome, in which the couple's names were read off one by one. 2 days later, on February 16th, we go to the U.S. Female Figure Skating Championship, which was won by figure skater Tonya Harding. Tonya also became the first American woman to land a triple axel in a competition. We may hear later in the decade from Tonya and her crew. On February 26th, the Gulf War allies liberated the capital of Kuwait after 208 days of Iraqi occupation. A reconnaissance team made up of 12 U.S. Marines who had been ushered in by Kuwaiti resistance forces were the first allies to make it to the city center. Meanwhile, Iraqi troops, under orders from Saddam Hussein, began to withdraw by the thousands. On their way out of Kuwait, the Iraqis set hundreds of oil wells on fire in an effort to destroy the Kuwaiti economy. Heading into March, where on the 2nd, singer Serge Gainsbourg died. During his lifetime, Gainsbourg was regarded as the most important musician in the style known as French pop. A singer, songwriter, pianist, and film composer, Gainsbourg also dabbled in other mediums like poetry, painting, writing, acting, and directing. Serge also had a fondness for unfiltered cigarettes, which his 5-pack-a-day habit may have led to the heart attack that killed him. The next day, on March 3rd, 4 Los Angeles police officers were caught on film beating up taxi driver Rodney King. Police had pursued King, who was intoxicated and had attempted to flee from them. The video, shot from across the street by bystander George Holliday, showed the 4 officers hitting King with their batons 53 times. The video was a seminal moment highlighting the relationship between race and policing. We'll see more of the fallout from the officers involved in 1992. In mid-March at 2 a.m., tragedy struck the country music world when 7 members of Reba McEntire's band were killed in a plane crash in San Diego, California, along with 3 others. Investigations later showed that the pilot, unfamiliar with the territory he was flying through, flew at an altitude that was too low. Just a few moments after takeoff, the left wing clipped an outcropping of Otay Mountain, where the plane crashed and exploded. LA Law made headlines again on March 21st, when the show gave the villainous Rosalind Shays the shaft, literally.
Objection!
Shays, played by Diana Muldaur, was the show's primary antagonist and was so despised by viewers that producers finally decided to off the character by having her fall down an elevator shaft mid-conversation. Rosalind's shocking and undeniably silly demise became one of the series' most infamous moments.
Verschwunden war sie. Splat.
It was just a few days later, on March 22nd, that high school teacher Pamela Smart, who manipulated her 15-year-old student lover, Billy Flynn, into whacking her ex-husband, was convicted of being an accomplice to first-degree murder, conspiracy, and witness tampering. The Exeter, New Hampshire jury deliberated for 14 days before returning the verdict, and Smart was later sentenced to life in prison. A few days later, Clarissa Explains It All debuted on Nickelodeon. The series starred Melissa Joan Hart as Clarissa Darling, a teenager with a habit of breaking the fourth wall to explain her thoughts to the audience, a la Ferris Bueller.
Just one question. Do I know Mom well enough to know how to make her think that she knows me?
Was equally popular with girls and boys, upending some beliefs that boys wouldn't watch shows with a female lead.
Clarissa Explains It All, every Sunday at 6:30, 5:30 Central.
On Nickelodeon.
The very next day, halfway across the country, we go to Tennessee, where raging thunderstorms spawned 20 tornadoes, which were reported in southwest Tennessee and southeast Kentucky. 5 people were killed, scores more were injured, and countless homes, trees, and automobiles were reduced to rubble.
Jesus H. Christ.
This is my post.
All right, put it down. Put it down.
And these are the post provisions.
just
All right, now get your ass off the wagon.
Put it down.
And help me unload.
We're just having a conversation. Now put it down.
In late March, the soccer world was rocked by news that Diego Maradona of Argentina had tested positive for drug use and would be suspended from play for as many as 2 years. Only a year earlier, Maradona had led Argentina to its 2nd consecutive World Cup final and Napoli to its 2nd Italian League championship. In 1989, Time Life launched the Comedy Channel, the first cable channel devoted exclusively to comedy programming.
The Comedy Channel. You laugh until you stop.
Comedy is our middle name.
And Channel, your last name then, right? Yeah.
A year later, Viacom launched Ha!, a competitor that showed mostly sitcoms and sketch comedy shows. But it turns out the world didn't really need both. So on April 1st, 1991, the two merged into a single channel called CTV, the Comedy Network. which they would rebrand just 2 months later as Comedy Central. Moving into April, disaster struck again when a plane collided in mid-air with a helicopter over Marion, Pennsylvania, a suburb northwest of Philadelphia. 7 people died, including United States Senator John Heinz. Heinz, whose family were the heirs of the Heinz Food Company, was the sole passenger aboard the plane, which had been experiencing problems with its landing gear. A helicopter in the area was enlisted to help determine if the landing gear was down or not, but it came too close to the plane, and the 2 aircraft collided. Heinz's widow, Teresa, would carry on his philanthropic endeavors and later married Senator John Kerry. In 1989, journalist Katie Couric joined the cast of The Today Show as a political correspondent. And when co-anchor Deborah Norville went on maternity leave in February 1991, Couric stepped in as her temporary replacement. Only Norville, who wasn't terribly popular with audiences, never returned to her post after giving birth. And so, on April 5th, Couric became permanent co-anchor.
From NBC News, this is Today with Bryant Gumbel, Catherine Couric.
A position she'd keep until 2006.
How did it sound?
Sounded good, but I still can't decide whether I'm Catherine or Katie.
In mid-April, the world lost legendary film director David Lean, who passed away on April 16th. Considered one of the greatest directors of all time, the 83-year-old British filmmaker won Oscars for Best Director for films Bridge on the River Kwai and Lawrence of Arabia, as well as directing classic films such as Dr. Zhivago and A Passage to India. Action star and alleged martial artist Steven Seagal was invited to host Saturday Night Live on April 20th in what would become one of the show's most infamous episodes.
There's a lot more to Steven Seagal than the martial arts.
Seagal's wooden acting.
Phelan was one of the best movies ever made, and I kick any you could say that didn't make that kind of money.
Refusal to poke fun at himself.
It's a tattoo. Yeah.
And hostility towards the cast resulted in 2 hours of uniquely terrible sketches and Seagal's lifetime ban from the show. The following Friday, ABC broadcast the premiere of the show Dinosaurs. Co-produced by Henson Studios, the show was a sitcom about a family of anthropomorphic dinosaurs. The animatronics used to create the characters made it the most expensive sitcom of its day.
I'm the baby, brand new, just out. Gotta love me. Come on.
On May 3rd, Dallas is... Dallas, the final episode. Trust us, it ends with a bang.
May 3rd brought the final episode of the iconic nighttime soap opera Dallas. The series, which was famous for Larry Hagman's portrayal of J.R. Ewing, had debuted way back in 1978 and titillated audiences with gimmicky mysteries like Who Shot J.R. and an entire season that was revealed to be a dream. It would be survived by its spin-off Knots Landing and followed up with a handful of Dallas TV movies and a short-lived reboot in 2012. Heading into May, President George H.W. Bush was taken to Bethesda Naval Medical Center after experiencing an irregular heartbeat. The 66-year-old president, who had been jogging with Secret Service agents at Camp David, had complained about shortness of breath. Bush was held overnight at the hospital for observation, but tests showed that other than the irregular heartbeat, he was in good condition. Bush would eventually be diagnosed with a thyroid condition named Graves' disease. On May 15th, real life imitated art, or at least the movie Naked Gun, when the real Queen Elizabeth went to a Major League Baseball game. Fresh out of the hospital, President Bush took Her Majesty to a game between the Baltimore Orioles and the Oakland Athletics. The Queen also got to meet MLB stars Tony La Russa, Jose Canseco, and Cal Ripken Jr. That must have been enough for the Queen Mum, because she departed after the 2nd inning. Baseball, it's no cricket. Johnny Carson, the iconic host of The Tonight Show on NBC, announced that he would be retiring.
It's coming to an end, next year. I've always wanted to be a shepherd.
Carson had been sitting behind the desk since 1962, when he was first introduced on camera by Groucho Marx. His replacement, frequent guest host Jay Leno, would take over on May 22, 1992. On June 2nd, MTV threw its hat into the animation ring with the debut of Liquid Television, a showcase for offbeat animated shorts that would serve as a launching pad for future series like Beavis and Butthead and Aeon Flux. Moving into June, every parent's worst nightmare came true when 11-year-old J.C. Lee Dugard was abducted while walking to a school bus stop near her home. Dugard remained missing until August of 2009, when she was discovered in the custody of Philip and Nancy Garrido. During her kidnapping, Dugard had given birth to 2 daughters, who were 11 and 15 at the time of her reappearance. Philip Garrido was sentenced to 431 years to life in prison, while his wife only got 36 years. California lawmakers approved a $20 million payment to Dugard and her 2 children. Dugard would later write a book about her experience called A Stolen Life, a memoir. Back to 91, and on June 12th, a dynasty began when Michael Jordan won his first NBA championship with the Chicago Bulls, beating the Los Angeles Lakers 3-1. Jordan led all scorers with 31 points per game, while dishing out 11.4 assists. Oh, yeah, and Jordan also hit this iconic shot.
Oh, a spectacular move by Michael Jordan! That's 13 consecutive field goals!
On the same day as the Bulls' victory, Boris Yeltsin won the first ever democratic election for Russian Federation president, defeating Mikhail Gorbachev's preferred candidate, Nikolai Rashkov. Yeltsin's campaign was directed at fighting against what he called the dictatorship of the center, which was his way of positioning himself as a clear alternative to Gorbachev and the Communist Party. Yeltsin would serve as president until 1999, and by the time he left office, he was a controversial figure who was generally unpopular with the Russian people. In mid-June, Michael Bolton's song Love is a Wonderful Thing peaked at number 4 on the Hot 100 charts. The song was included on Bolton's album Time, Love, and Tenderness, which would go on to sell 16 million copies worldwide. Good. The song prompted the Isley Brothers to file a lawsuit for copyright infringement. They also had a song called Love is a Wonderful Thing, but they recorded and released it in 1964. Bolton claimed he had never heard the Isley Brothers song, but a jury disagreed and granted the Isleys the largest plagiarism settlement in the history of the music industry, ordering Bolton to fork over $5 million of the song's profits. Justice. Speaking of crime, just 4 days later, Pablo Escobar, the head of the Medellin cartel, was taken into custody by Colombian authorities. Escobar, who was one of the most wanted men in the world, negotiated his surrender for a month with an 82-year-old Catholic priest. He finally agreed to turn himself in after an assembly rewrote the Colombian constitution to ban extradition. The drug kingpin was taken to a luxurious private prison on the outskirts of Medellin. We may hear more from the Narcos King later in the decade. For you true historical crime fans out there, on June 26th, Kentucky's chief medical examiner put a persistent conspiracy theory to rest when he announced the results of tests conducted to determine U.S. President Zachary Taylor's cause of death. Some had suspected that the 12th president, who died in 1850 at the age of 65, was poisoned by Southern politicians because he opposed extending slavery into the western states. Taylor's body was exhumed and DNA samples were taken, but no foul play was discovered. Taylor's real death was the result of any of a myriad of natural diseases which could have produced the symptoms of gastroenteritis. Mystery solved. On July 1st, Court TV started broadcasting trials to a surprising amount of success. The channel, which focused on live coverage of prominent criminal cases, legal talk shows, and other crime-themed programs, was surprisingly popular for a while, before rebranding to True TV in 2008.
Hasta la vista, baby.
July 11th brought what astronomers refer to as a total solar eclipse of the sun. A solar eclipse is when the moon passes between the sun and the earth, obscuring the image of the sun in whole or in part. A total solar eclipse is when the moon's perceived diameter is larger than the sun's, blocking all direct sunlight and literally turning day into night. The darkness moves in a narrow path across the Earth's surface, with a partial solar eclipse visible over a region thousands of miles wide. This total solar eclipse first cast its shadow over the Pacific Ocean and Hawaii and moved across Mexico, down through Central America, finally ending over Brazil. The darkness lasted as long as 7 minutes in some places, and according to astronomers, the Earth won't see a longer total eclipse until June 13th, 2132.
I'm talking about the message, what it stands for. It's called gentrification. It's what happens when the property value of a certain area is brought down. Huh? You listening?
Yeah.
On the last day of July, the United States Senate voted to lift a ban against women flying combat missions for the Air Force, Navy, and Marine Corps. At the time, women were already working as test pilots for jet fighters, training U.S. combat pilots and flying transports, tankers, and other military aircraft. It took 3 hours of debate, but in the end, the measure was approved 96-3.
This Sunday, why face the nation when you can face the animation? Nickelodeon's new cartoons are stimulating and tasty.
And on August 11th, Nickelodeon aired the first block of Nicktoons. The 90-minute block marked the debuts of what would become 3 of the channel's most iconic animated series.
Kids are attempting to build time machines so they can race through the week and go straight to Sunday, where they'll find Doug, Rugrats, and Ren and Stimpy.
The incredible success of those initial 3 would encourage the company to continue the block, which would eventually serve as a launchpad for future hits like SpongeBob SquarePants. Moving into August, Metallica released its 5th studio album. Technically titled Metallica, the record is now better known as the Black Album. It contained future classics like Enter Sandman, Nothing Else Matters, The Unforgiven, and Sad But True, almost all of which spawned hit music videos as well. The album debuted at number 1, selling 598,000 copies in its first week, and was certified platinum in just 2 weeks, and then spent 4 consecutive weeks atop the Billboard 200. The very next day, on August 13th, the man behind the Barbie doll, Jack Ryan, died. Ryan also invented other classic toys like Hot Wheels cars and Chatty Cathy dolls, and held over 1,000 patents as VP of Research and Design for the toy giant Mattel. But Ryan designed a lot more than just toys. The inventor also designed Sparrow and Hawk missiles for Raytheon, and was once married to Zsa Zsa Gabor. Now, that's a life. On August 15th, Paul Simon gave a free show in New York's Central Park. Park shows were common in the 1970s and 80s, when acts like James Taylor, Elton John, and Jefferson Airplane played, but became unpopular after gangs and hooligans run amok following the 1983 Diana Ross concert. Backed by a 17-piece band, Simon drew 750,000 New Yorkers to the show. Simon later said that the concert was the biggest thrill of his career. Sticking with music, on August 27th, Seattle band Pearl Jam introduced itself to the world with its debut album, 10. Made up of former members of Mother Love Bone and a then unknown Eddie Vedder, Pearl Jam's first album featured hits like Alive, Even Flow, Jeremy, and Black. At first, it received a lukewarm reception and sales were slow. But by January of '92, it would enter the U.S. albums chart, where it would stay until 1996, selling over 10 million copies in that time. How appropriate. The name 10 actually refers to the band's favorite NBA player's jersey number, who was Atlanta Hawk guard Mookie Blaylock.
Now, these decisions should be easy, but if you take a look inside Herman's head, you'll see why he sometimes has trouble making up his mind.
On September 13th, Montreal's Olympic Stadium was rattled when a 55-ton slab of concrete fell from the roof of the Olympic Stadium's walkway. Officials would go on to blame complications caused by nearby construction of a soccer stadium. Luckily, no one was hurt, but the stadium was immediately closed for repairs, and the Montreal Expos had to play all of their remaining MLB games for the season on the road. Dommage. Then, on September 17th, ABC aired the series premiere of Home Improvement. Based on the stand-up comedy of Tim Allen, the show followed Tim the Toolman Taylor, Home Improvement TV show host.
We want a job done right, and we want it done quick. What do we need?
Who lives in suburban Detroit with his wife and 3 sons. The Smash series, which made light of Tim's obsession with tools, would go on to run 8 seasons, finishing up with one of the most watched finales of all time. 2 days later, on September 19th, The Simpsons aired the episode Stark Raving Dad, in which Homer befriends a man who believes he's Michael Jackson.
This is what Michael Jackson looks like. You look like a big fat mental patient.
However, a few highly observant viewers noticed the character's voice was suspiciously similar to the real King of Pop.
The training wheels come off your bike. You start to notice boys you like.
You're just putting that in because it's commercial.
As it turns out, it was Jackson, working under the pseudonym John J. Smith, for legal reasons. September 19th, 2 Germans accidentally made a prehistoric discovery on an alpine glacier right near the Austrian-Italian border. It was a well-preserved man, who would eventually become known to the world as Ötzi. He was at first mistaken for someone who recently passed, and authorities clumsily extracted him using ice axes and jackhammers. Researchers in Zurich quickly determined that Ötzi was a 45-year-old man who died about 5,300 years ago. They also found an arrowhead in his shoulder and concluded that he may have been killed as part of a raiding party. Scientists determined Ötzi naturally mummified after being covered with ice shortly after meeting his demise. 5 days later, Seattle music struck when Nirvana released their second studio album, Nevermind. The album is now hailed as one of the most influential albums of the 90s and helped lead the grunge charge, with hits like Come As You Are, Lithium, In Bloom, and of course, Smells Like Teen Spirit. In its lifetime, Nevermind has sold over 30 million copies. September 24th was an incredible day for music, because on the same day, Queen's hip-hop group A Tribe Called Quest released The Low End Theory. Now widely considered to be one of the greatest and most influential records of all time, The Low End Theory debuted to critical acclaim. While there was some initial doubts about its commercial potential, those didn't last long. Singles like Check the Rhyme, Jazz, We've Got, and Scenario, and by February of '92, the album would be certified gold. Back in the day, it wasn't unusual for a sitcom that was running out of steam to add a new character who was usually a cute little kid.
This was the worst day of my life.
And that's what the Alan Thicke sitcom Growing Pains did on September 25th, when the Seaver family took in Luke, an orphaned teen played by Leonardo DiCaprio.
She lets me invite you over to her dream house for tea.
Well, I never turned down an invitation from a beautiful woman.
Despite being played by the future superstar, Luke wouldn't help ratings much, and the season would prove to be the show's last. Staying with more music, 4 days later on September 28th, it would be a sad day for the jazz world when legendary trumpeter Miles Davis died. A Juilliard dropout, Miles joined up with Charlie Parker's quintet early in his career in 1945. He would go on to revolutionize the sound of jazz multiple times on landmark albums like 1949's The Birth of Cool and 1970's Bitches Brew. Most impressively, his 1959 album, Kind of Blue, to this day remains the best-selling jazz album of all time. If you happen to be watching MTV's Alternative Music Showcase 120 Minutes on September 29th, then you saw rock and roll history being made.
These songs are Nirvana. And you're up very late on a Sunday night.
That was the day the show debuted the now iconic music video for Nirvana's Smells Like Teen Spirit. The video, which depicts the band performing the song at a high school pep rally, turned the group into superstars, and the album Nevermind into one of the best-selling albums of all time.
All these people want to know, where in the world is Carmen Sandiego?
Carmen Sandiego is a tricky one to track down, but on September 30th, you could find Where in the World is Carmen Sandiego debuting on PBS. The children's quiz show, based on the computer game series, was hosted by Greg Lee and featured special appearances by actress Lynn Thigpen playing the Chief, as well as the musical group Rockapella.
Where in the world is
Carmen Sandiego?
Heading into October, televangelist Jimmy Swaggart was pulled over by police for driving his Jaguar on the wrong side of the road. The 56-year-old preacher was found in the company of a woman named Rosemary Garcia, who later told the media that she was, in fact, a lady of the night. Oh, Jimmy. Swaggart, who sat at the head of a $150 million a year religious empire, had previously been caught being a John. This time, Swags would have to step down as head of his ministries. On the same day, during confirmation hearings for Clarence Thomas, President Bush's Supreme Court nominee, University of Oklahoma Law School professor Anita Hill went before the Senate Judiciary Committee and testified that Clarence Thomas had sexually harassed her. She testified that Thomas had repeatedly asked her out, used work situations to discuss sex, women having sex with animals, and often bragged about his own sexual prowess. Thomas, who was the second African American in the history of the court to be nominated, famously characterized the proceedings as a high-tech lynching. Ultimately, he was confirmed by 41 Republican and 11 Democrat senators. Staying on October 11th, the comedy world said farewell to funny man Red Fox. Born John Elroy Sanford in 1922, the notoriously foul-mouthed comic honed his craft on the Chitlin circuit of black nightclubs during the 1940s and 50s. Fox's stand-up influenced generations of comedians. Red also became a household name starring on the hit show Sanford and Son, which aired on NBC from 1972 to 1977. Later in life, he regularly headlined in Las Vegas and starred alongside Eddie Murphy and Richard Pryor in the 1989 film Harlem Nights. On October 13th, Season 3 of In Living Color debuted with a few new faces, including future Oscar winner
Jamie Foxx
and future icon Jennifer Lopez, who became one of the show's Fly Girl dancers. Lopez would stick around for 2 seasons, and Foxx would stay on until the series ended in Season 5.
Mirror, mirror on the wall.
In late October, legendary screenwriter and producer Eugene Wesley Gene Roddenberry died. Roddenberry is best known for being the creator of Star Trek, which debuted in 1966 and ran for 3 seasons before being canceled. It found new life in syndication and the movies, and Roddenberry would continue to create, produce, and consult on Star Trek films and television series for the rest of his life. Flash forward to April 21st, 1997, where a Celestis spacecraft carrying portions of Roddenberry's cremated remains was launched into Earth orbit aboard a Pegasus XL rocket. Heading into November, British newspaper magnate Robert Maxwell was found floating dead near his yacht off the Canary Islands. The media tycoon, whose holdings included companies like the New York Daily News, Macmillan Publishing, and the Daily Mirror in London, was born Jan Ludwig Hyman Benjamin Hoch in Czechoslovakia. An Orthodox Jew who escaped the Nazi occupation, he eventually fought with the British Army, which gave him the name Robert Maxwell. He would go on to serve in Parliament, and in the 1970s, he was recruited by Israel to work as a spy. After his death, huge discrepancies were found in his company's finances, including hundreds of millions of dollars that Maxwell had stolen from pension funds. Even more notable, Maxwell's daughter is none other than Ghislaine Maxwell, groomer to the wealthy. Check out our Timeline 2020 video if you want more of her whereabouts. 2 days later, on November 7th, NBA legend Magic Johnson shocked the world when he announced that he was retiring from basketball because he had tested positive for HIV. Considered one of the greatest players in NBA history, the lifetime Los Angeles Lakers star signed a 25-year, $25 million contract in 1981. After his retirement, Johnson still played in 1992's NBA All-Star Game, as well as on the famous Olympic Dream Team, with fellow superstars Michael Jordan, Larry Bird, and Patrick Ewing.
Is that you? Counselor? Come out, wherever you are.
On November 18th, Cheyenne Brando, the 21-year-old daughter of screen legend Marlon Brando, was arrested in France and deported to Tahiti. French police had picked up Brando in connection with an arrest warrant issued by a judge in Papeete, Tahiti. Cheyenne had been charged with complicity in the murder of her boyfriend, Dag Drolet, who was killed by her brother Christian Brando on May 16, 1990, at Marlon Brando's Hollywood mansion. Christian, who would plead guilty to voluntary manslaughter, was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Cheyenne would take her own life on April 16, 1995, at her mother's house in Punaui, Tahiti. On November 24th, just 1 day after confirming the rumors that he had contracted AIDS, Zanzibar-born Queen frontman Freddie Mercury died at the age of 45. Along with guitarist Brian May, bassist John Deacon, and drummer Roger Taylor, Mercury helped to create a unique musical mixture of hard rock, pop, glam, cabaret, and opera. Songs like We Are the Champions, Killer Queen, Another One Bites the Dust, and Bohemian Rhapsody would make Queen one of the most popular rock bands and the centerpiece of 1985's Live Aid concert. On November 28th, 23-year-old Egyptian-born model and nanny Omaima Nelson murdered her 56-year-old husband, William Nelson, in their Costa Mesa, California apartment. According to Omaima, Bill had assaulted her earlier in the day. As a response, she later used scissors and a clothes iron to take her husband out. And like a mobster, she chopped him up. Then, oddly enough, mixed up his body parts with leftover turkey and disposed of the mixture in the family garbage disposal. According to neighbors, the disposal unit was running for hours after the time of Bill's death. Leftovers? No, I'm full, thank you. Moving into December, Charles Keating, chairman of the Lincoln Savings and Loan Association, was convicted of 17 counts of fraud, racketeering, and conspiracy. Lincoln acquired Lincoln Savings and Loan and promptly looted its assets, while Keating used his sales personnel to convince depositors to put their money into high-risk junk bonds. The scandal remains the largest savings and loan collapse in history and cost American taxpayers almost $2.6 billion. After hearing from several of his victims, mostly elderly retired people, the judge sentenced Keating to 10 years in prison and to pay a $250,000 fine. Keating ultimately only served 4.5 years. On December 21st, media tycoon and CNN founder Ted Turner married Jane Fonda on a ranch near Capps, Florida, about 20 miles outside of Tallahassee. The relationship ratings were good until a decade later, when the couple divorced in 2001, when Fonda's Christian faith had come between them. In a 2008 memoir, Turner clarified he was upset at Fonda's decision to convert without consulting him first. Marriage is about communication, people. Let your loved one know you're going to convert. And finally, on the last day of the year, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, better known as the USSR, was officially dissolved. The disintegration of the Russian state had been a long time coming and became inevitable after a failed coup the previous August. The former world superpower fractured into its 15 separate countries: Armenia, Azerbaijan, Belarus, Estonia, Georgia, Kyrgyzstan, Latvia, Lithuania, Moldova, Russia, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan, Ukraine, and Uzbekistan. And that's how 1991 ended. 1992 was just hours away. It would be a year where a champ would go on trial, a city of angels would burn, and the mother of all malls would open. But that is for next year. Coming soon, 1992. So what do you think? What do you miss most about the 90s? Let us know in the comments below, and while you're at it, check out some of these other timeline videos.